talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on that.
Good morning and welcome to Boxing Matters with Glenn McCrory. Great to have you back on, Glenn, after having you on a couple of weeks ago and talking about your life. So we got our heads together and just thought we'd come up with a little sideshow which takes me away from the pressure of Newcastle United shows, to be honest, and talk about my other great love, which is boxing.
Yeah, plenty of pressure there, isn't there?
Oh God, you're not wrong, mate. What a week! I mean, you couldn't script it. It's like a carry-on film at Newcastle at this moment in time, isn't it?
You know what? It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. Every time you see a match, every time there's any news about the club, everything's so frustrating. It makes you so angry, doesn't it? You know, you want things to go right for once. You want a bit of luck and something to go right.
Hopefully things will settle down, and they've got to win this weekend, Glenn. That's the key. Yeah. If they win this weekend, especially with the way the results have gone for us, fingers crossed, we can start concentrating on trying to get this takeover done, and then you and I, as Newcastle fans, can sleep a little sounder in our bed.
We haven't slept for. I don't think we've ever slept good with Newcastle United our whole lives, have we?
No, well, I just remember as well, we were actually at that infamous game, weren't we? We were both guests of somebody in a box for the final game of the season. John Carver was the manager, and Honus got that goal which kept us up. Do you remember?
Oh, but, I mean, we've had a few classic days as well. You know, I had some great days there with Gibbo and that. So yeah, I tell you what, just can't wait to get back in the stands. To be honest, just want to see sport come back, football come back, and most definitely want to see boxing back and fans back in the stadiums.
Well, that's enough football talk from us. Obviously, I would love to talk about boxing with Glenn, and that's why we've got him on. So, got a lot to talk about. We've picked out a few topics of interest, some huge fights coming up, and of course a big documentary, Glenn, which was released on Sky Documentaries a couple of weeks ago. I think we've all had time to watch it and digest it now, and that was two people who you know very, very well, Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno, and I found that a fascinating documentary, I've got to be honest. I mean, obviously it focused on those fights that took place between the two fighters, but it also focused on them getting back together after all this time. Pre-COVID, of course, Frank travelling across to the USA to meet Mike Tyson at his wonderful home and, put a few things to bed. But what was your take on the documentary?
You know, I thought it was great, but it really was, for me, it was a trip down memory lane, because that was all, I was there throughout it all, and documenting it all with Sky TV and at the fights and around those guys. So it was very much a trip down memory lane for me as well. It was some good times, some tough times for the fighters. It was good to see. It was really good to see the guys, where they are now at this stage in their life, because similar age to myself, to see that they've both been through a lot, as fighters tend to do. They've both been through a lot, and it was good to see them kind of come out the other side with friendliness and a bit of peace within themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it was heavily focused, I think, on mental health, which is important. It's always important, but increasingly important at this time when we all still face a period of, lockdown and restrictions on things that we would normally do. So, to focus on that was really important. They've both had big struggles.
They did, and I mean, they've put a nice name to it now, mental health. They've kind of made it. Give it this good tag, but when we were around Tyson at that time, and just before Tyson was going off the rails, you just thought he'd lost the plot completely, and sometimes it was very difficult to be around during those times, and as I say, it's good to see him coming through all those troubles. It's hard when you're dealing with, in Tyson's and Bruno's case, millions of pounds. And millions of pounds are going out your bank account to other people, and boxing has got a bad rep for that, and I suffered from it an awful lot myself. the thing that comes across is that we're young, rough and ready guys that are not really ready for fame, for the business, for high profile relationships, all that sort of stuff, and that really came across. That how hard it is to handle when you all of a sudden you come from nothing and then you're thrust into the limelight, and it's there's no training for that in boxing or any sort of sport. But boxing, there's also a bit of an underbelly, a bit of a dirty underbelly in boxing, and often that comes, that's they're always trying to get their hands, people are trying to get their hands on fighters and control them. And I think Tyson fell foul of Don King, who has done some sensational things in boxing, and a lot of fighters will be very, very critical of their treatment by Don King, and I think that showed with Mike Tyson.
What was your memories of those fights? I mean, you were ringside, you watched those fights. What was your memory of those two fights in particular?
Well, I think the first fight, my memory was Tyson. It was a bad time for Tyson, and he was taking things lightly. I'd been around him, with Kevin Rooney and Matt Baranski when I was training in the camp, when I was part of Team Tyson, and he was really well looked after. That had been taken away from him. The relationship with Robin Givens, his life had sort of fallen apart a bit, and it was just, he was just starting to lose it, and he wasn't the same person. He wasn't training the way he was, and he nearly, Frank landed a good shot, and for the first time, you start to see there was a weakness there with Mike Tyson. You start to see there was something wrong, and then for the second fight, we'd had that wonderful experience when Frank in London at Wembley against Oliver McCall, who was in camp with me, was a Tyson sparring partner, who took the title off Lennox Lewis, and then Frank on his third attempt or his fourth attempt won the heavyweight championship of the world, which was an absolute epic time for British boxing, and I think the whole nation loved that. And then you kind of knew that in Frank's head there was something he wanted to do, and that was get Mike Tyson. So I mean, he went against most people's advice. He went straight in with Tyson for that second fight. And I remember ringside with Ian Dock was sitting there, and Ian asked me the question on comedy, "How does he look?" And I said, "Ian, he's crossed himself 52 times. It's not a good sign." and it wasn't. You could tell that Frank had lost it on the way to the ring. The nerves, the fear, everything had crept in then. And I've seen it so many times before. He was beaten on that walk to the ring.
Do you think that was the fear factor with Tyson? Do you think a lot? I mean, you sparred with him many times. Do you think that he had a lot of his opponents beaten, before they got in the ring?
100%, Steve. 100%. You've come across fighters, in your lifetime, and you've come across hard men. You've come across tough guys, and you've probably come across some quite crazy people as well. And Tyson was one of those guys. Me and John Gibson did a program called "The Meanest Man on the Planet," and it kind of focused about why Tyson had this extra fear factor. All fighters are tough. Your heavyweights are all big and strong, and you knock you out in one shot. But Tyson had something else. He had a part of him which you couldn't quite, it seemed like a bit of a crazy side to him where you just couldn't trust what he would do. And we've seen that when he bit Evander Holyfield's ear off. He just went above and beyond toughness. And we described it in this program with Sonny Liston. John had been around Sonny Liston and been with him in Las Vegas, and said Liston was exactly the same. Sometimes there's an extra sort of fear with some characters that you will have come across, and certainly Mike Tyson was one of them, where you just he's tough, but you just don't know what he's going to do next. And I think that's a lot of the appeal of Mike Tyson as well. You know, this aura of, you know, craziness as well as toughness.
Yeah, amazing times and some great memories. And of course, it's good to see Frank now. He set up his boxing academy. You know, he's promoting a lot about mental health as well. You know, he's got himself. It appears that he's got himself on the right track at last. And Mike Tyson, you know, seems to be a very successful podcaster now across in the USA. You know, seems to have picked the right woman finally, and he seems to have got himself back on track. Done some wonderful after dinner shows as well in recent years.
It's great. It's great to see. It's great to see, you know, from both guys, because as I say, it is very tough. There's a lot of stuff out there that, you know, we all come across in life, relationships, business, jobs, you know. And I think we're finding this more than ever now, you know, during the pandemic, that it's gonna be a really big issue. And, you know, you look at people like them to inspire you a little bit. You know, you look at Tyson Fury, and you see who's gone through a lot in his life, and, you know, so many of us have had those bad moments, those dark places, and, you know, I don't know what it's. I'm sure you know a lot of the footballers, certainly a lot more than I do, and I wonder what it's like for them, because I think there's also something that comes into your mental health of when you are in the limelight, and you know, you don't get in boxing or get in football to be in the limelight. You get in to play football or to fight, you know, because you love the sport. But then all of a sudden you're in the limelight, and you've got all that, and you're the focus of people's attention, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and it's gone when you're still young. You know, you're still young in your life, and yet everything's cut off. You know, it's kind of like, what do you do now? And do you find lots in football and other sports that people have suffer the same when their career's over?
Yeah, you do. You know, I mean, there's been some pretty high-profile Newcastle players have come out and spoken about it. Steve Howie, obviously a good friend of ours. Steve Harper. But yeah, it does happen. It's that I think probably one of the biggest known personalities to people worldwide is probably Paul Gascoigne. He's had constant battle, not only with the demons that he faces from you know, past events in his life, but obviously his addiction to alcohol, to drugs, and to other things like Red Bull. So yeah, it happens across a walk of life. I think the key is, Glenn, people like yourself, people like Frank Bruno, people like Mike Tyson talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I you know, me personally, I suffered for many years. You know, mine is a lot that I've never come to terms with grief. You know, so many people close to me when I was young died, that you know, maybe that's just being in a big family and that sort of stuff. But it was a very tough upbringing and that sort of stuff. And I've suffered from that. Obviously had my own demons, and it is really tough. But, you know, back in the day, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when you know, it was really at the forefront for me. You didn't talk about those things. You know, you didn't go. You know, you've got them uncles down the mine. You've got steel workers. You know, you come from, you know, your generation before you was a tough generation, and you know, you just get on with it. And I think it's good now that, you know, you can talk and you can ask for help. And I think, you know, seeing other people, you know, for me to see Tyson Fury, you know, that helped me a lot. To see Tyson say, you know what, I need help, and go out to see him when he was 28 stone out in Spain, trying to get his career back together again. And he was really struggling then. You know, every day he was kind of saying, I'm going home, I'm going home. And they were trying to keep him there. And he's just saying, I'm throwing the towel in. So that has inspired me. And, you know, if I can inspire anybody, because it's been very tough for me. And now things are I'm feeling a lot better. I'm training really hard. I'm in a much better place. So I think that's there for everybody. You know, and help's there. And I think don't suffer in silence. Don't put your head in the sand. Just say, I'm hurting. Just say, can you help me? Just phone a friend. Phone somebody that cares for you. and just get it out. Get it out. You'll feel a lot better, and that's when the journey starts, and that's when the recovery starts.
Great advice, and as you say, phone a friend, very, very important. We'll take a few questions because there is a few coming in. Glenn, would you pay to watch Tyson versus Lewis? He said he wouldn't.
Would I pay? Do you know what? I don't think I'd pay to see anybody. I've been very blessed to be paid to go and watch people for the last 30 years. Tyson Lewis. Do you know what? I think I don't think at this stage, me and Roy Jones are going to put one of these fights on, and people are talking, and it's great that people are talking about these matchups later in life. Tyson Lewis, I saw it years ago, and Lewis did a job on Tyson, and I don't really think Mike at this stage in his life would want to go in with, I know Lennox is retired as well, but Lennox, trust me, is a big lump. He's a big lump. He's a strong lump, and he can hurt you. And I don't think these fights later on are great, and if they can make a lot of money, that's fantastic. But I don't think Tyson will want that after what happened the last time. And likewise, I don't really think he'll. Obviously, if there's a massive amount of money, he will. But I don't think Mike will really want to go in with Holyfield, because he's had two bad defeats to Holyfield, and I don't think he'll want to go there again. So yeah, I mean, hey, listen, I would pay to watch Lennox Lewis in training camp. He's a great champion, great athlete, and then there'd always be an interest if he's going to get back in there with somebody.
Yeah, it's one of those. I'd love to see Lewis back and doing something. I'd just love to see him on the after dinner.
Back in with me though, Steve.
No, we'll move quickly on from that, mate. Dean Henry says, is there anything happening with the Roy Jones Jr. fight? I mean, it's a couple of weeks since we had you on. These things take time, but is there anything happening with that? Obviously, with COVID, etc., I can imagine there's going to be delays.
Well, no. I mean, the fight looks set to happen in the UK, in the Northeast, at the end of June. I think that's all sort of penciled in. Roy's aware of it. I'm aware of it. Simon and Robin at Tough Boxing are busy working away. There is a bit of interest from a couple of other countries, which obviously has to be sort of looked at, and to see what they want to do as promoters. But I spoke to Simon Whittle last night, and he'd spoke to Roy the night before, and he was just, don't let nothing concern you. The fight is on. It's gonna happen. 100%. It's gonna happen, and just be ready, because Roy will be. So that's all I need to hear. That's all I need to hear. That gets my attention straight away. If Roy Jones is going to be ready, then I'm going to have to be.
You got to be, yeah. Gary Milligan says, who's your money on when AJ fights Fury? I think we touched on this the last time, but I mean, things change. We're still, eagerly anticipating a date for that. But what's your take on that? I still feel Fury, if this happens sooner rather than later, and we don't have any more delays, I still see Fury winning this.
If this happened now, Fury, I would pick Fury. If it was happening now. But if it happens in 6 months, if it happens in 8 months, if it happens next year, I think you'd have to ask me closer the time, because, as we touched on with Frank Bruno and Mike Tyson during that fight, Frank lost it from the dressing room to the ring. Everything come in his head, and he lost it there, and that's what can happen. Now Tyson Fury seems to be really confident. He's coming off a fantastic win over Deontay Wilder, so his confidence is sky high. On the other hand, AJ, was beating off Ruiz comprehensively, in a catastrophe, wasn't it, for the AJ in his camp. Came back and showed his skills, showed everything he had to do to get a win. Was I massively impressed with the win? I wasn't. It was an out of shape, very overweight Andy Ruiz. So I'm a fan of of AJ, I think he's a fantastic athlete. He's been brilliant for British boxing. But at this moment, I think Tyson Fury definitely has the advantage. But let's just keep. What I want to see is you want to see boxing back up and running, and you want to see these guys back in the gym, and you want to see it all alive again, and who's doing what. And I for one, one of my ambitions is to go and spar with Tyson. I wanna go over and spar with Tyson because I sparred with Mike Tyson, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, 35 years ago, and then I wanna spar with Tyson Fury 35 years later, just to see what it's like, just to see. I don't do things by half, Steve, do I?
You don't. Dublinator says, hi Steve, please tell Glenn I'm the one on Twitter who made the fan art. I hoped he liked it. And he says, my question is, what kind of exercises is he doing to get back in the ring? How hard is it compared, to back in the day?
Do you know, it has been immensely hard. Absolutely. The last 6 weeks, I've come from, absolutely zero. From not training, and I've never, I fell out of love with boxing big style after my treatment in boxing, and I sort of vowed never to do anything boxing. I've never hit a bag. I've never sparred. I've never hit a bag. I've never hit pads. I've never done any of that for 28 years. So then getting, obviously your mind is still 25, and your body thinks your mind's nuts. So it has been very, very hard. Just the basic things of trying to get a level of fitness. And for me, I always, I brought up on Rocky, and Rocky was, Sylvester Stallone. His portrayal of a fight was old school, and it was, pounding the streets and doing the hills and chopping wood and hitting the bag and all that sort of stuff. So. I'm very much in the old school sort of training. So it's just been hard work. Just trying to put consistency, just trying to do Monday to Friday, just putting the work in. And that's what we're doing. My son's training me, Joe, and he wasn't born when I won the world title. He's now training me. He's a 30-year-old. So that shows you how long it's been. But I think it's probably, this is not. It'll be the biggest comeback of all time if I can get in that ring and put on a good show against Roy Jones, because literally nobody after almost 30 years has even thought about getting back in the ring.
Paul's asking, who would you like to take on after Roy Jones? I suppose you need to see how you do in that one. And he says, do you think there should be an over 50s league in boxing like there is in football?
Do you know what? There's only sort of one real name that me, I'd fight anybody, but there's only one real name that at this time in my life would sort of interest me, and that would be Mike Tyson, because we shared the ring 35 years ago. It is very, very best. He's just boxed a draw with Roy Jones, but he looked very strong, and Roy had to use every bit of skill to try and nullify him. So I don't want to. I've got one thing on my mind, and that's just to get to Roy Jones. That that in itself is just a huge challenge. At the minute we're thinking about getting fit, I've then got to think about getting my boxing and remembering everything and getting combinations off and being free from injury. Then you've got to deal with somebody punching you around the chin. And Roy only finished a couple of years ago. He just fought Mike Tyson, so he's still ticking over, not far off good shape. So it's a massive challenge. I've just got to be. Let's see what we do with Roy first.
Let's look at a fight that happened over the last couple of weeks. Josh Kelly, of course, took on David Avanesyan, and it was a 6th round stoppage for Avanesyan. It was disappointing. It was a fight which was billed as a chance for Josh Kelly to show exactly what he could do, but didn't get the result that he wanted. Glenn, did you have a chance to catch that fight, and what was your take on it?
Yeah, I did. Obviously, I was very interested seeing a young up and coming fighter who's very skillful from the northeast. So obviously took a big interest in it. And going into that fight, I was thinking he's getting a big build up. He's getting a big build up, and one of the problems with being with a high ranking promoter like Eddie Hearn is obviously you get all the press and publicity, and you're thrown out there. Now, has he had the build up? Has he had the right training, the right background to go in with somebody like ASEAN? I wasn't sure. It was a calculated risk. It didn't come off. He looked a bit. I mean, he looked cut to bits, but he looked very drawn as well going into that fight. So making weight is always a worry. As it was for me, it's always difficult. The first couple of rounds, his attitude, everything looked very, very good, very sharp. He looked hard. He looked in the right frame of mind. But that also went like the third or fourth round. There seemed to be doubts coming in. So I must admit, I was disappointed. When he fell apart, he fell apart quite rapidly. I've got to say, great results for Carl Greaves, who I know very well and who trained at ASEAN. It's one of those things. It's one of those things where, as a fighter, it's disappointing, but you've got to come through. You've got to come through things like that, and that's one of the problems of having that the high profile manager. It's also high profile when you lose, and sometimes an advantage is if you're just learning your business without the bright lights, without the TV on you. You can get ahead a lot more. So it's not the end for Josh. It's one loss. It's really what he does from here, what he learns on. I think he's got to ask himself, truthfully, what does he think went wrong? I've always thought it's very difficult for a Northeast fighter, to go away. I went away to London. Billy Hardy went away. We came back to get our successes, and I think it's hard for Northeast fighters, to be outside our area. We're pretty much home birds.
Yeah, no, we are. That's definitely true. We'll wish him well. I hope he manages to recover from that. There's still a lot of talent in Josh Kelly, and as we know, one defeat doesn't end a career. But I think he does have a serious amount of thinking time to decide what he wants and what direction he goes in, and he needs to do that with Adam Booth, really. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's got to have a look to see is Adam the right trainer. Adam's someone that goes along with him having his hands down and the way he fights. That's something that I don't. Some people will say, well, that's his style, that's his flair. But if you see Mike Tyson, the meanest man on the planet in his heyday, fighting like this, I mean, just take a clue. Just it's not rocket science. Just take a hint from one of the greatest. Look at Julio Cesar Chavez. Look at Roberto Duran. Hands are up. Muhammad Ali, if you watch, Ali was something different. Ali was an enigma. So I think he's got to have a look. He's got to have a look at if training's right, if he's suited down south, if there's problems going on in his personal life. There's lots of things that can just knock you off. Boxing is a very, very tough game that you need everything to align. All the stars need to align for you to be at your best. And unfortunately, they weren't that night. And he needs, as you say, Steve, he needs to have a good look at where he goes from here.
Keith Rules asked a question. He says, do you think a fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. will happen? And who do you think would win if that fight happens?
It's a great. It's an absolutely superb fight, and so often you want these fights to happen, don't you? And when they do, you have some great periods in the game, like we did with Duran and Hagler and Sugar Ray Leonard and Hearns. When the fighters fight each other, and sometimes you want them matches to happen, like we wanted Pacquiao and Mayweather to happen, and it did, but it happened like 5 years later than it should have happened. When it was going to be a real good fight. So they're both terrific fighters. Terence Crawford, I mean he's doing great. I think I'd probably go with Terence Crawford at the moment. Errol Spence, another terrific fighter. But yeah, I think I'd go with Crawford.
Okay, good stuff. Best pound for pound fighter on the planet right now, says Paul Oxley.
Well, I think you've got to go for Canelo, haven't you? I think you've got to, at the moment, he's the golden goose, and what I like about Canelo is he's moving up weights. He's not a big, he's not a massive guy, but you can see him. He's already been up light heavyweight. Beat Callum Smith. He's he's doing it all. So I think definitely it's him. And I admire the fact that he's fighting more regular than the big superstars do than certainly a Mayweather did. I mean, what's he had? He's had two in the last 4 or 5 months, and then he's got Billy Joe Saunders in a few months' time. So he's nice and active. We're seeing an awful lot of him. But he's got Billy Joe, and I'm excited about that fight because Billy Joe is something very, very different. Very, very different. He just doesn't care. He really doesn't care. He's just he's not going to be phased. So that's going to be one to watch. That's going to be something special. I think. Do not underestimate. Can't even say it. Do not underestimate Billy Joe Saunders because he has got terrific skills. He can punch when he's on form. Which he's on form. The better the fighter is, the better Billy Joe is. So I guarantee he's going to rise to this occasion, and it's a massive occasion. Now, is he gonna? It's all about the mentality. When you're going in with one of these superstars that everybody thinks is sort of unbeatable. Callum Smith, I thought Callum Smith had an excellent chance of winning, and he didn't turn up at all, did he? I mean,
No.
He just did not look. You've got to. You can't sort of read what's in somebody's mind. So you can look at all their skills and everything they've done when you analyze a fight. Look at their past, what they've done, what they've gone through, but you can't analyze what's in their head. And if they somehow don't believe, then they're a different fighter. And that was Callum Smith. I don't think that will happen with Billy Joe Saunders. So I think Billy Joe Saunders, I think there'll be some fun and games wherever that fight happens before the fight with his fans. Because we've seen, they can upset people.
Yeah.
They can upset countries. Certainly, before the Tyson Fury fight, they were getting in Deontay Wilder's head, weren't they? I mean, they were throwing breakfasts on him and pouring water on him, and they just messed with him. And Billy Joe's the type of person that he knows what he has to do to win.
Yeah, going to be a cracking fight that. May the 8th, unification fight. And as Glenn says, don't write Billy Joe Saunders off in that one because he's one of those fighters who can certainly rise to the big occasion. And other big fights on the horizon. We've got Dillian Whyte 2, which I've got to be honest, I'm looking forward to because that original fight, Glenn, I don't think Whyte did a great deal wrong. But ultimately, he ended up like that.
No, Polak.
And that is the beauty of heavyweight boxing. I think that's why it's always been the one that people love to watch because you get two blokes who are 18 stone plus in the ring. Then it doesn't matter about your reputation. No. It's always about who lands that punch, and we've seen it with AJ. We've seen it with Mike Tyson. Nobody is indispensable in a boxing ring in the heavyweight division.
No, and you know what? Can you remember a fighter called Butterbean?
Oh God, yeah. It's funny enough, Charlie.
Butterbean.
Yeah.
This is where you say looks can be deceptive, and you talk about heavyweights. There's a guy that He was a big fat guy, looked ridiculous. Went in the ring. I mean, it was only the best guys that could beat. I mean, knocked everybody flat. Was going through them, just going through them, and that is heavyweight boxing. If you've got the power, you've got the equalizer.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting contest, that to say the least. And I mean, I suppose with Whyte, it's a last chance saloon fight, really, because he needs to win this fight, doesn't he, to get himself back in contention. But he needs to win the fight for his own peace of mind after doing so well in the lead up to being knocked out.
Well, Steve, he was supposed to win the first fight. I mean, that was, Povetkin's at the stage now where he is an opponent that's still good enough to test the up and coming top liners. So he's there as a mark for who's going to go on to the major title fight. So that wasn't supposed to happen. The one thing about Povetkin is he's a quality, well schooled, great pedigree, ex-champ, and all the rest of it. So he's got that. And as you say, it was all he wasn't doing anything wrong, Dillian Whyte. And one shot, and it was. You can see why he was such a good amateur, world amateur champ, and all the rest of it. But you see that, I mean, it was just a step to the left. He just lent his weight over to the side, left uppercut, absolutely spine-tingling punch. Now the return, that obviously Dillian Whyte wanted that fight straight away. That fight was made straight away. And I thought that was a mistake. And I thought if had that fight happened, it got cancelled due to COVID. But had that fight happened last year, straight after the first one, I think the same thing would have happened. In a way, it's turned out good for Dillian because he's had time. He's had time to come to terms with the loss. So it's not about just instant revenge and ego and all the rest of it that comes into your mind of get back, straight back. He's had time to think about it. He's gone away.
Well, we've lost Glenn temporarily. May have got a phone call, so bear with us while he comes back.
Am I not there? Sorry.
You're back, mate. You're back. Don't worry.
So he's come. So it's been a bit of time now. He's had time to think. He's had time to get himself right. He's training properly. He's which he does. He goes to town. And he's abroad somewhere training, and he hasn't come back. He's stayed out there. When the restrictions or he's carried on his training camp. So I think this time. Last year I would have took Povetkin to win the return as well. Now I think Dillian Whyte will come through this. He'll find a way to win. Now he'll have looked at what he did wrong, and I don't think he'll do it a second time because his career is on the line, Steve.
Yeah, no, I mean it is, and it's a huge fight, big opportunity essentially for him to get himself back in the mix. And again, we watch on with interest. I mean, of course, a lot of these fights dates are confirmed, but at the moment with COVID, etc., things are getting put back time and time again. So we just hope that these fights go ahead as scheduled. Another one I just want to touch on, Glenn. Yeah. A fight since we last spoke was, of course, Josh Warrington. Who boxed back in February last month, suffered his first defeat, mate. And again, it seemed to be a weight issue for me. I might be wrong, but he just didn't seem as if he was fully focused. And we've seen this time and time again where a boxer comes in, a fighter comes in, he looks ripped, he looks well toned, he looks as if he's ready to do the business, but then seems to just lack energy. And I think those of us who watch boxing or been involved in boxing for collectively as long as you and I have, you can see the signs, and it did look as if he'd struggled with the weight.
It could well have been the weight. Your preparation is always a key. For me, the big thing that was missing for Josh Warrington was the thing that he thrives on so much, and that's a crowd. That's a crowd. It's like myself. I'm a fighter like Josh. You feed off the crowd. I was lucky to have a Northeast crowd around me. I wouldn't have won the world title, Steve, if it hadn't been the fact that fight was in the Northeast of England. I was in with a very tough opponent, and the crowd took me. Yeah, it was amazing. Josh Warrington. I mean, if you've ever been to a Josh Warrington fight in Leeds, it is bedlam. It is unbelievable, and the energy that you get from that. Josh Warrington, with his Leeds fans behind him, is unbeatable. But then all of a sudden, you're in a dressing room, and you're coming out to an empty arena, and against an opponent that nobody's rated, nobody's heard of. You know, they just brought somebody out there. So straight away, instead of your whole self and your whole confidence and all that going like that, you come out the dressing room and your confidence goes like that. Because it's like, what's all this about? And it just seemed to me that he went in the fight. There was no fear factor. There was no nerve factor. There was no factor of letting your crowd down, of losing in front of your own people, which is, you know, is the hardest thing in the world. So I didn't feel there was a lack of thought. And I mean, straight away he went and stood toe to toe with the only thing that his opponent had was looked like he was strong and had a punch, very raw. And Josh Warren could box the ears off him on any other given day. But I think he came in the fight just thinking, you know, let's just get this done. Let's just go through it. And there was no, you know, it's the same in football. You know, you put Newcastle at home with a packed crowd, you know, they'll take on anybody and, you know, have a great game. You know, it's a whole lot different when teams are playing in front of empty stadiums. I mean, I just think sport without crowds is not sport.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's worth a goal start. You know, sometimes home support at St James's Park. Having said that, like under the current manager, I think there would have been a lot more booing and abuse. But that's a different show. You've got to give credit to Maurizio Lara. You know, we're saying that, you know, perhaps it wasn't the best Warrington, or perhaps it was because the crowd didn't turn up. But we all know Mexicans. You know, they're a tough bunch, Glenn.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing you can never do is underestimate your Mexican opponent. You know, because they come there, they're hungry. He knows that Josh Warrington was a world champ. You know, I mean, it wasn't for the title. He'd given that up. But I mean, a bad mistake. You know, I mean, Matchroom's got to take some of the responsibility for that. I mean, you know, I'm sure they would have checked, you know, but I'm 100% positive they would have checked Lara out and seen what he'd done. And to be fair, you know, Adam Smith, they were making excuses for Lara early in the commentary. You know, Adam Smith in the commentary, they were saying that Lara looked very novice, you know, when he did his training on the build-up, you know, because everybody was there because they were all in lockdown, in quarantine. So, you know, they'd seen his preparation, and they were making excuses for him. But I just thought it was totally the wrong fight. And I think Josh Warrington had beat him 9 times out of 10. And, you know, if he comes back and fights him again, you know, make sure it's in front of a crowd. But the crowd makes so much difference. You know, absolutely so much difference. It's that's how you get in the gym. You'll have seen in the gym, sometimes you see kids, and there are $1 million in the gym, you know, when there's no crowd. But part of the whole thing. I mean, you know, I'm Errol Flynn, or, you know, I'm a great actor when I'm by myself. stick me at the Theatre Royal, I might struggle a bit more. Do you know what I mean? But you know, you need that. You do need that. You know.
I find it interesting, you know, and I'm not one for conspiracy theories, but I'm often sceptical of how the bigger promoters work. I'm a small promoter, like, you know, work with Phil Jeffries in the Northeast and put on pro shows up here. I want to come to that before we're finished today, actually. Yeah. But do you think, because there's no end to COVID in sight, and I know we've got this roadmap, I don't genuinely buy into these dates. You know, you can't take anything for granted. That's one thing that COVID's taught us. But do you think that there's a certain degree of I don't know, a lack of preparation. You're talking about the way people are being matched, Glenn, and perhaps there was a mistake made there. Maybe they're almost like looking after the best fighters, and some of these local fighters which they've built up maybe aren't as important as the bigger fighters. Does that make sense to you? So looking after your Furies.
Yeah, I think one of the things to look at, Steve, is Eddie Hearn is now becoming a global promoter. It was very noticeable that Eddie was very much around Canelo. It was his show. He was promoting that fight. He's Canelo's promoter. So I think the whole matchroom promotion has gone global now. So is there the same care about the grassroots fighters, the British fighters? Is there as much that is their operations become that big now that they're making a few mistakes? I mean, that certainly looks possible, because we've had a few of their fighters beaten in the last couple of matchroom shows. So I think they need to look at what's happening there, because it's very easy to start thinking about all of the superstars, and then you forget about your bread and butter. And when crowds come back, people you don't really want to be getting people like Josh Warrington knocked off. People like Josh Kelly. I mean, there could have been some great nights in the Northeast, ahead of him. But that's gone as well. So it's a difficult time, because obviously Frank Warren, they're trying to put shows on, and under COVID restrictions, that's very, very tough. I would imagine all the hoops they've got to jump through. That's tough, and they're trying to do that to keep the business going, and you got to say well done to them for that. But the vast majority of boxing has had their sidestep. So I'm very hopeful that COVID is finished soon. Obviously, I want to have my own little dance, my own little last dance with Roy Jones. But seriously, I want to see Northeast boxing back. I want to see your shows coming back. I want to see the arena and the Eagles Arena and all these places buzzing again with fights, and on a national scale, you want to see it all come back to normal.
We do. I mean, it's 10 years since I did my first show at the Lancastrian Suite. There's me, Neil Fannin, Tommy Ward and Phil Jeffries with a bit more hair there. But that was taken 10 years ago. And it was a great honour for me to work alongside Phil, who's been a pioneer, if you like, since Tommy Conroy, hung up his promoter's licence. Yeah. And, we've done a hell of a lot. But it's almost going to be like starting again, Glenn. That is my big concern. Those fighters who've had to essentially find other ways of making money and keep themselves fit in the anticipation of a fight coming up, that's going to be the hard part. It's going to be like coming back into a new dawn, because I've got a Northern Area title holder. I've got Ellis Corey, who's lost, like everybody else, lost a year. Joe Laws has had one fight. He was going to be special. Lewis Ritson, one fight. I mean, even those at the bigger end of the scale. It is going to be tough, Glenn, isn't it? Having that time off, and that self-discipline really will have had to kicked in with the fighters and with the trainers, and gyms haven't been able to be open in big periods of time either. So it's finding new ways of training, I guess.
It's been unprecedented times, Steve, and I think you'll find a lot of changes. You'll find promoters that. You'll find new people that are coming in, seeing an opportunity. You'll find promoters that have been around just thinking, I can't be bothered anymore. This has just hit me too hard. You'll find fighters that, had a great deal of hunger, that haven't been out for a long time and start to do something else. Think, what? Am I going to bother going back to that? And then you're going to get young kids that, just see a great opportunity. So, I think it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be exciting. The one thing about the one thing about boxing is it always thrives in the world's toughest periods. You find that, when there was wars, you find it gets tougher for people. The world, the climate, the jobs, and all the rest of it. So you find that more people started to fight, more people started to box, and we'll see the same thing. You'll see people that can't get jobs or lost jobs, will suddenly say, you know what, I'm going back to fighting. I'm going back to boxing. So we will see, boxing does thrive in tough times, and always has done. And I think we'll see boxing come out of this in a big way, and we'll see fighters come out of this in a big way, and we'll see fighters that maybe were a bit blasé, thinking, you know what, I've got one chance, and realize that they've got one chance, because everything's been taken away for us for the last 12 months. The world, it's been taken away from everybody. Work's been taken away from me, from you, from everybody. So I think now you look with a vigor and think, you know what, I want this. I want to make a statement. And I think, I'm sure you're seeing that yourself, where you think, you know what, it's an open playing field when we come back. And, I think a lot of people will be going for it.
Yeah, okay, we've got 10 minutes left. Let's get through a few of the viewers' questions. Paul Oxley says, do you rate Tommy Fury?
It's very early days. It's very early days. He's definitely got talent. You would do being a Fury, and with all the fighting family around you, and they all know about fighting. So he's definitely got potential. I mean, the problem with Tommy is he's become a star before, he's become a big name because of Love Island before he's done anything in the boxing. So, there'll be a lot more pressure on him than the others, So it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Tommy. It's going to be tough, but he's definitely got the talent, and he's definitely got the people around him that can make it happen.
Keith Rule says, what are your thoughts on Daniel Dubois? Do you think he can come back from injury and still get a title shot?
100%. Absolutely 100%. Daniel Dubois is a good fighter. He got an eye injury. You could tell that against Joe Joyce, who didn't do anything special, but just kept there, kept plodding away, kept throwing the jab, just kept picking them off. He didn't really have a plan B, Dubois, did he? And that was quite obvious. But I think he's a talented kid. He's very young, to be in there, to be at that level, because you're talking, just below, is he 21? He's very young and just below world title level there. So he'll come back. He'll I definitely think he'll be a name in the heavyweight division shortly. I don't think it'll take him long to regroup and get back there.
Dublin 8, I wanted to know, did you see the fan art on Twitter, first of all, and did you like it?
Of course I did. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's great.
Good stuff. And he says, can you ask Glennie's opinion on Jones versus Anderson Silva?
You know what? I don't want to think about Jones fighting anybody else, because he's promised he's going to fight me. Anderson Silva, I don't know anything about him. Do you know what? I don't know what you're like, Steve, but I feel, maybe I should know more, but it's not my sport. UFC, MMA, any of that sort of stuff. I mean,
I don't like it.
That's great for them guys, but I don't like it. It's not my thing. I don't think, I've never been one for the kicking or the kneeing or if you got somebody on the floor and they're out and you're hitting them. It's, what I love about boxing, and that's just my opinion, I mean, they're all great athletes and great fighters. But my opinion, I like boxing because it's the noble art. It's, you get stuck in. There's an act. There's an art to it. And then afterwards, give each other a hug, and it's that sort of. I love it because it does have its restrictions and its rules, and it's like it's like how people will see rugby. I mean, it's a load of big guys bashing the crap out of each other, but it's done in a very gentlemanly, disciplined, regulated way, and I like that. I like that. And I've just never, I've never been excited by it. So sorry.
No, me neither. Gary Milligan says, what did you think of John Davison as a fighter? Of course, another local lad.
John Davison, he's a great little fighter. absolutely great little fighter. Great guy. I mean, give the Northeast so many great nights. Came within a whisker of winning a world title, but won just about everything else. No, brilliant, great guy, friend of mine, and give us some monumental nights.
I had some good nights out with John, top lad, and we'll wish him well. Dean Henry says,
Don't buy any antiques off him.
Don't buy any antiques off him. Definitely, he's no Lovejoy. Put it that way. Dean Henry says, who do you think has got the best chance of winning a world title from the region in the next couple of years? And also, what is happening with the McCormack brothers?
I mean, Lewis Whitson might get the opportunity. Obviously, they're going to try and give him the opportunity. Obviously, it's been tough having a year out. Just as he's getting a bit of momentum coming back, then he's out. He's certainly got talent, Lewis. Tommy Ward, young Tommy, isn't it? He's close on world title fights, isn't he? I mean, he's definitely up there. It's difficult up here, Steve. As we who've been in the game for a long time, you get a quick chance, a quick bite at the cherry, and then it's gone. And they just move on. Boxing's not sort of the big names aren't centered here, so it's difficult. The McCormick, Cyrus Parson, there's some excellent kids that let's hope they get a chance at the Olympics this year. Will the Olympics happen, and will they have just wasted 5 years? I don't know. I'd rather have seen them kids turn pro a few years ago, because they might have left. By the time they come pro, they might have left their best work in the amateurs.
Yep, I would agree. It's been tough time for everybody, but hopefully things improve over the next couple of months. Glenn, we'll get you back on.
The good thing is, Steve, there's names out there. I mean,
yeah.
we've got on an amateur level, and this is what's a bit frustrating. On an amateur level, there's stars out there. There's about 5 Northeast kids on the GB squad, in line for the Olympics. So at that level, it's fantastic. And there's always been the difficulty of swapping over, into the pro ranks, because the opportunities aren't there, and it's tough. And I think maybe this COVID, what yourself's doing, Phil Jeffries are doing, I just hope that maybe there's an opportunity for the TV stations. I think things are going to change a little bit. I'm not sure what Eddie's going to do, and I just think there's going to be opportunities open themselves up, and I'd like to think the Northeast got a bite at it, because the talent is here. We just it doesn't get a chance to be honed. There's not enough focus on this region. Maybe one night's not enough. It needs constant focus. So I'm very hopeful that that'll happen. Hopefully, myself and Roy Jones will kick it all off in June, and and bring some excitement to the Northeast, even as 2 old blokes, but bring a little bit of bring the crowds back, and bring the something back to the region.
A lot of love for you in the chat. Great show. Stephen Glenn says Keith. Tom Dixon says fantastic show. Dublinator says really enjoyed the stream. Great questions asked. Thanks very much for answering my questions. Good luck in your fight with Jones, says Paul Oxley. Great to see Glenn on again, says Bazza. And everyone just very happy. And listen, I'll put my money on Tommy Ward. If people stop sidestepping him and he stops getting used as a bit of a political pawn, I'd say he's got a good chance of getting a world title in the North.
Very much.
Keep an eye on Tommy Ward. Technically, he's one of the best fighters we have in the region, and very, very talented. Comes from a family of fighters. Martin Ward was special as well. Get on very well with his brother Jimmy. Big shout out to him if he's watching. I miss all of those people. You miss the boxing family when there's no boxing on. Thanks to our sponsor Spider VPN, who sponsor the StreamYard application. Thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend. Very appropriately, thanks to John from Jab Signature, who sorts us out with the snazzy gear. And thanks to one of our main sponsors this month, Geordie Riffs, premium guitar lessons for beginners and children, guitar repairs and servicing, recording studio. Get them on geordieriffs.co.uk and on all the socials, Instagram and Facebook. Ever played the guitar, Glenn?
No. You know what, me and music just don't go. I like listening. No. It's like my Japanese, Steve. It's not very good, mate.
Speaking Japanese, playing the guitar. We'll leave everybody with that, Glenn. Look forward to getting you on next month when we'll have plenty to talk about with all of those shows in the bag. You have a good month, mate. I'll see you soon. Take care, pal.
Good, Steve. God bless, mate.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna